I want to talk today about anorexia in males. Now, the reason I want to talk about that specifically is because there's actually a lot of research to show that restrictive eating disorders and anorexia present differently in males than they do in females. And one of the most notable things is that with females, a lot of times the, motivator for restricting their intake is to be thin. Whereas in men, that's not the case. In males, it's often this, what sometimes they refer to as big orexia, meaning they're trying to build muscle, or their anorexia kind of manifests in obsessive exercise and rigidity around food, as opposed to some of the other things that we can see in our female counterparts, right? So what I'm going to list to you is actually some of the signs and symptoms of eating disorders in males that can be a little bit different from how it would present in a female. So first and foremost, it can be excessive focus on exercise, which, as I've mentioned before, can be seen as healthy. People are like, oh, well, he's just getting into X, Y, and Z, or he just started running, but it's the excessiveness about it and the time spent exercising. What we find most often in males is it's not just obsessive exercising, meaning they go every single day or even twice a day, it's the time spent. They'll sometimes spend 3 hours or more at the gym. There's also rigidity around eating and eating times. So one thing that they're seeing that presents a little bit differently is that they have to eat at specific times. They have to eat at this time in the morning, this time in the afternoon, this time at dinner, and they really won't deviate from that. And actually, their structure of when they're eating and when they're exercising is very rigid as well. And if that gets thrown off, they get really, really worked up or really, really upset. A lot of times what they will see is they actually will eat large amounts of food. They'll eat very large volumes of food, but it often tends to be lower calorie things. Or they do this thing where they restrict all day and eat one huge meal in a day. That again can present a little bit differently than in females, because in females, oftentimes it's very small portion sizes, whereas men, it can actually be large portion sizes, but again, a very small, very low calorie foods. They also oftentimes will refuse to eat certain food groups. Now, I know that's very similar to with females, but one thing that we're actually noticing is that it's all under the guise of being healthy. Like, oh, yeah, I don't eat dessert because who needs dessert? When really it's just a way to restrict, right? Because what they won't tell you is that they're never going to eat dessert. It's not that they're just trying to limit dessert and not eat it every day or whatever it might be. It's that they're never going to eat it regardless of when that is presented. Another thing is there's some unusual behaviors around food. Like sometimes it might be that they stand while they eat, or that they're cutting food into tiny little pieces. Now I realize some of that can also be in females, but this is just some stuff that we're noticing in males. The other thing, now this can kind of go for both, right, is obsessively reading nutrition information or counting calories. Of course, we know that one, but this is definitely one that we see in the male population with eating disorders. And by the way, I'm looking over here because I'm just reading from a list a little bit that I want to detail on. The other thing would be constantly weighing themselves, right? So yes, I realize that can happen for both males and females, but what's happening with this is oftentimes they say that they're not afraid of gaining weight, that they actually want to gain weight. However, what tends to happen is if they're seeing a change in their actual body, they get concerned. Whereas with women, what tends to happen is they are concerned about the weight on the scale. Regardless of whether or not it's muscle or fat or fluid or whatever it is, if that number goes up, they panic. Whereas with males, that doesn't necessarily happen, but if they're noticing differences in how their body actually looks or feels, that's what's more important to them. They don't get so hung up with the actual number on the scale. The other thing would be, and again, this can be similar for everybody, is avoiding social situations around food. Now, I want to point this out because, again, a lot of times the kind of, common questions or common things you might ask someone who has an eating disorder might not present in a male. Like, again, they may say that they're not afraid of gaining weight, or that they're just doing this because it's healthy, or they saw this online, when really you need to look at the rigidity behind it. Are they really stuck to a certain schedule? Are they obsessed with exercising at this very specific time? Is the time that they're exercising increasing and increasing and increasing? Now, I want to point this out because, again, it presents a little bit differently. We will do a case study on this in a future video, so stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't forget about that video coming up.